This material is protected under Fair Use Law, Section 107. False DMCA claims are a crime. Don't forget about Exodus 2016. Opponent arguments. No geologist will state that the world was flooded for a full year and 10 days. A global flood would not leave the fossil record or geologic column as we find it today. No archaeologist, anthropologist or historian will say there were 8 people alive 4,500 years ago. It is impossible for 4 couples who are related by blood to spawn our entire genetically diverse civilization. Scholars and creationist groups, like Answers in Genesis, agree that this flood was about 4,500 years ago, 2,500 BC. Other cultures around the world survived as normal through this time and didn't drown. How can those older cultures be unaware of a global flood?
Neolithic Chinese cultures, Huangshan, Fe, Makang, Henan Longshan, Shandong Longshan, Lianshu, Shijia, Hebei Longshan, Baodun, Tani Shan, Shixia, Nianus Huan, Qinglong Kuan, Heidang, Bayankan, Kia, did not cease to exist 4,500 years ago, but instead continued before, during, and after the supposed global flood. How can Mesopotamia be united under the Akkadian Empire in 2300 BC if they're all dead? Empires do not rise suddenly and inexplicably after only 8 people were alive 100 years previous. The early Bronze Age is well documented and could not have been propagated by 4 couples of humans just 100 or 2 years before. No land plant would survive being crushed under 30,000 feet of water suddenly, much less for a whole year. In order for it to rain for 40 days, the air pressure from the water vapor in the atmosphere would create around 13,000 psi pressure per square inch, which is lethal, instead of the planet's normal 14.5 psi at sea level.
The worst rainfall in recorded human history is 3.8 centimeter, or 1.5 inches, in 1 minute, from Barrow, Guadeloupe's. Mount Waialeo, on the island Kauai, Hawaii, gets an average of 474 inches per year, with a record of 683 inches, or 57 feet, in 1982. In order to reach 30,000 feet, or 360,000 inches, in 40 days, it would have to rain at a rate of 750 feet, or 9,000 inches, per day, 31.25 feet, or 375 inches, per hour, 0.52 feet, or 6.24 inches, per minute. Given the daily food requirement of a zoo, feeding 16,000 animals, much less 50,000, for an entire year is quite impossible. One penguin would need a little over a ton of food for a year. Elephants eat 300 to 500 pounds of food per day, making it around 91 tons of food for one elephant for just 1 year. It is physically impossible for 8 people to tend to the supposed numbers of animals on the ark, even if there were 1 minute a day to feed and clean them. With 6 hours of that day per person to sleep, eat, and clean themselves, that leaves 18 hours to tend to the animals. 1 animal per minute, 60 per hour, 1,080 per 18 hours per person, of which there are 8. How long would it take a kangaroo, polar bear, Komodo dragon, or capybara to get to Turkey? Dinosaurs. A single brontosaurus, much less 2, would have destroyed the ark simply by walking on it with all of its 35 metric tons of weight onto the cypress wood planks. Some dinosaurs are up to 100 or even 134 feet long. Some are 40 to 60 feet tall. Others, like the Allosaurus, are estimated to be as much as 180 tons in weight.
There are about 527 genera of dinosaur, with 10 to 20 being discovered each year. Estimates are around 1,800 in total genera that we could possibly find in the next century or 2. Some we will never find. Dinosaurs did not live with humans. The Flintstones cartoon was not a documentary. There are no books or reports in any culture's history that refer to town defenses against roaming groups of Spinosaurus aegyptiacus. Mixing the world's fresh and salt waters would have destroyed marine ecosystems. There's no mechanism for the waters to have divided into fresh and salt water bodies 4,500 years ago. There's no mechanism to dispose of 30,000 feet of water on the surface of the entire planet, nor producing it in the first place. Global population at around 3000 BC was about 20 to 25 million. In 2000 BC, estimates place global population at 35 million.
Exodus is placed at 3,500 years ago. Bible says over 600,000 males over 20 years of age left Egypt, making it nearly 1 million people including women and children. 4 couples cannot reproduce into 1 million in under 1,000 years, from 2,500 to 1500 BC, much less 35 million. If you believe in Noah's Ark, you believe in superevolution. The rate of speciation of those limited pairs of animal would require an impossible speed to make up for the known and unknown level of diversity on this planet in such a limited amount of time. The excuse of fossils on mountains doesn't work. Identifying those fossils will reveal that they are simpler forms of marine life that have not been around for a very long time. There are no elephant or human fossils along with those marine fossils on mountain tops. Admitting the world wasn't flooded for a year and 10 days invalidates the story as factual. Admitting the world was not covered in 30,000 feet of water invalidates the story as factual.
A single Norway spruce tree has a root system that has been growing for 9,950 years. Sitting under 3,000 feet in altitude, it obviously didn't suffer a global flood for a year. Additional trees in Sweden have been shown to have survived for 5,000 to 6,000 years. California White Mountains has a 5,000-year-old tree. The Arizona meteor crater was not formed in the last 4,500 years, as a global flood would have erased or filled in much of it. The Ark itself has not been found, and the claims by Ron White have been refuted by multiple governments and agencies who have examined that specific Ark claim site near Doggy Bay with multiple tests.
Others of Wyatt's team have retracted their support for this claim, realizing they were mistaken. David Fossold is among them. Lawrence G. Collins, retired professor of geology from California State University, Northridge, published a paper co-authored by Fossold, who was heading the last team permitted into the now military zone in Turkey. Bogus Noah's Ark from Turkey exposed as a common geologic structure, published in Journal of Geosciences Education, Volume 44, 1996, page 439 through 444. Multiple cultural references to their own versions of a flood story when those cultures are supposed to be dead doesn't exactly stand on the firm foundation of logic. If different versions and other cultures for a religious event in a specific faith is some kind of proof, what about virgin births? European Project for Ice Coring, EPICA, in Dome Sea at Antarctica has a 3-kilometer ice core sample that shows the last 740,000 years of snowfall. This sample describes 8 separate ice ages.
The Genographic Project, and the data on mitochondrial Eve, refutes the suggestion that the entire human population came from 4 couples 4,500 years ago. Human migration around the world did not start 4,500 years ago with one family. If the Grand Canyon was formed as a result of a single massive flood, there would be similar geologic formations around the world. The Grand Canyon shares no traits or formations in common with any kind of flood, and in fact the meandering of the canyon, along with about a dozen other items, is evidence against such a suggestion. Hawaii is a landmass created by a hot spot under the Pacific Plate. The Emperor Seamount Chain, the history of this hot spot for the last 80-some million years, is impossible to form in 4,500 years.
The suggestion of the water supply for the flood coming from an extraterrestrial location, like comets, is absurd. They would disintegrate in the atmosphere or explode on impact, vaporizing the water and incinerating much of the surrounding area. If fissures opened and released as much water that would be needed to cover the planet, the entire crust of the planet would have collapsed in on itself, destroying the geologic column. This would also eliminate an escape method for all of that water, as there would be no place for it to drain. If magma boiled off significant portions of the ocean, every single fish and ocean-dwelling animal would die instantly, obliterating every marine ecosystem. This would also present serious thermal issues for the rest of the world, not to mention making the atmosphere too wet and thick to breathe. There are physical limitations to a strictly wooden boat, regardless of overall design, which would make the Ark itself impossible. The excuse of a supercontinent doesn't work. Continents don't move. The tectonic plates do, and slowly at that, 50 to 100 millimeters a year. A supercontinent would take several hundred million years to spread apart, not 4,500 years.
Plain water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. Ocean water does freeze, but it depends on the salt content. At 30,000 feet, the temperature gets to about minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The surface water would have frozen, entombing Noah and all the animals to a slow death by freezing. There's 1/4 the amount of oxygen at 30,000 feet than at sea level. Normal humans cannot reach 5 miles in altitude without assisted breathing tanks. 1980 Reinhold Messner's just amazing, much less survive for 150 days while tending to tens of thousands of animals.